something that I almost regret. I told him that, it says kabed et avicha v'et imecha, et lerabot et achicha agadol. Which means, it says you should honor your father and your mother, but in the Torah there's a word et, which seemingly is superfluous, but it's not, because every et was expounded upon by Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva came up with the idea that the extra et in kabed et avicha v'et imecha refers to your older brother. I don't regret it at all. I can tell you, my Ach HaGadol is someone that deserves my respect and the respect of all of us here for the monumental tasks, as have been said. Ike is a Hazzan. If you look at the Talmud for the word Hazzan, it means something completely different. But I can tell you, I think the word Hazzan in this particular case means Chazon. Chazon means a vision. Ike had a vision, and he worked on it relentlessly for so many years. I don't know too many other people who could have done what my brother has done. This siyum mitzvah of these chamisheh, chumsheh, siddurim, and mahzorim is unbelievable. And I give you the author of these books, the editor of these Sephardim, the author of the statements within the dikduk, within all of the wonderful additions to make it more concise and more pleasurable. I introduce you to my brother Yitzchak Azose.
Thank you all. With the authority invested in me as the Hazzan Emeritus, I ask you please to take your seats. Reshut Rabbanim, honored guests. Good evening, everyone. It is indeed an honor and great pleasure to see all of you here this evening. I was particularly pleased that three of my children, Amy, Saul, and Yossi, took the time and trouble to leave their families and fly in from New York to be here with us this evening. My son, Jack, as was explained earlier, has been working for Deloitte in Tokyo for the last 2 to 3 years, but could not get away. I sincerely thank all of you here tonight for honoring me with your presence. If someone were to ask me, Ike, other than your family, what achievements or accomplishments in your life are you most proud of? I would have to say the series of 5 Siddurim and Mahzorim, Hebrew prayer books, that I have published over the last 12 years. A very few of you know the story, but I would like to bring it out into the public arena. I need to ask your forgiveness in advance because I know that my presentation tonight will probably bore many of you. However, this is the only opportunity I have to bring my thoughts and remarks to the public. I became Hazzan at Ezra Bessaroth in March of 1966. In the late 70s and early 80s, I began noticing that the young men of the congregation, when called upon to lead a service, were treating the prayer book then in service, the Spanish-Portuguese de Solapul Daily Sabbath Prayer Book, as the de facto nusach, or custom or tradition, without making any changes to the text at all. At this point, I have to explain. I was born in July 1930. As I was growing up in the old central area, my father, Jack, alav shalom, would take me to synagogue with him. I would listen to the Hazzanim at the old Sephardic Bikur Cholim. The Sephardic pioneers from Turkey and Rhodes, who came in the early 1900s, brought with them the prayer books that had been in use in the Ottoman Empire. To the best of my knowledge, The prayer book then in use by both congregations was called Tefillat HaChodesh. We can show that on the screen now. Is Rabbi Myers? There we go. No, that's not it.
There it is. That's it.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, Tefillat HaChodesh. Later on, a small, almost pocket-sized prayer book was published by the Hebrew Publishing Company of Delancey Street in New York, called Tefillat Yeshurun. Upcoming should be the cover of that Tefillat Yeshurun. And then the next one is the inside page of that Tefillat Yeshurun. It was small and thin, which was very convenient, in Hebrew only. Later on, a Hebrew-English version was published, but the English was atrocious, and the English version of the book was seldom used. I listened to the Hazzanim very carefully and made mental notes of where they would leave out or add in words and phrases. In the late 1940s and early 50s, however, both the Bikur Cholim and the Ezra Bessaroth bought the Desolopul series of prayer books, the Daily Sabbath, the Festivals, the New Year, and the Day of Atonement. You see, it was Rabbi David Desolopul's dream that all Sephardic synagogues in the United States, no matter their background, should use the same prayer book. And he wanted that prayer book to be his Spanish-Portuguese series of prayer books. How do I know this? Well, there was a Ladino language newspaper by the name of La Vara, which means the stick, which was published in New York City and delivered to every city in the United States which had a Sephardic synagogue. La Vara was published from 1922 to 1948, primarily in Ladino. I say primarily because I have an article from La Vara, published on August 3rd, 1934, which had an article in English written by Rabbi Dr. David Desolopul. Thanks to a good friend, Dr. Maureen Jackson, who is with us tonight. Maureen, where are you? Thank you. She steered me to a book published by Professor Aviva Ben-Ur, who taught at the UW for a few years in the late 90s, and who has been with the University of Massachusetts for many years now. A book with the title of Sephardic Jews in America, a Diasporic History. In her book, there is a reference to the article in question. Let's see if I've still got that copy here that I can read. If you look at the bottom paragraph, Rabbi, if you can make that a little bit larger. Yeah, okay. It is therefore a great source of rejoicing to announce that the edition of our prayer book, which has now been given to the press by the Union of Sephardic Congregations, not only has an English translation, but also has the approval of the chief rabbi of the Syrian Jews of New York, leading Hazzanim of Oriental Jewish congregations in New York, and the rabbis of the old American Sephardic communities. May this prayer book to be published in the coming year, 5695, which is equivalent to 1935, bring to our scattered Sephardic communities a true inner unity, founded on a common spiritual heritage that shall be actively shared, and may the new edition of the prayer book bring to the Sephardic Jewry a greater measure of knowledge and devotion to our ancient traditions. So it was Rabbi Desolopul's dream that every Sephardic synagogue in America utilize the Spanish-Portuguese prayer books, which he published, and for the most part, he succeeded. I say for the most part because, despite what it says in the article, he was not successful in convincing the Syrian, Lebanese, and Egyptian synagogues, most of which were primarily in the New York area. However, he was successful in convincing the synagogues whose members originated in Greece and Turkey, including Rhodes. I was able to obtain a copy of some correspondence between my revered uncle, Rabbi Solomon Maimon, and Rabbi Desolapul, dated December 1949. Here's the letter from Rabbi Maimon to Rabbi Poole. I think we've got an English translation on the other side, in case you can't read the...
It's in English.
Down at the bottom it says, towards the bottom, the reason for the delay is that we expect to make a concerted drive to bring the holiday during the holiday and beforehand, to make a standard uniform prayer book in our synagogue the practice, instead of the two we have now. So Rabbi Maimon asked Rabbi Desolapul to send an order of 200 prayer books. And the next letter, which is a response from Rabbi Desolapul, says, we are very happy to send you 250 copies of our cloth-bound festival prayer book. It will be all right for your congregation to pay for this after Pesach. The price of the festival book is $3.50. As it costs us more than that amount to have it printed, we are unfortunately unable to give the 10% discount on this prayer book. But we do give a 10% discount on all other prayer books bought in quantities of 25 or more copies. Note the statement, we expect to make it a standard uniform prayer book in the synagogue, the practice, our practice. I have another letter on my computer at home, I didn't bring it with me, written by Rabbi Maimon to Rabbi Desolapul 7 months later in July 1950, regarding ordering the Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Daily Sabbath prayer books, and also discussing 3 possible candidates for Hazzan, among whom was the one they chose, Reverend Samuel Ben Roya, Alav Shalom. I intend to send copies of these letters to the Bikur Hurim for their archives. Another reason for embarking on my quest to publish a Siddur for the Seattle Sephardic community is because of what the Desolapul Siddur lacked. One of the major omissions is the lack of the Sefer Torah readings on Monday, Thursday, and Shabbat afternoon. I remember that during our weekday morning services here at Ezra Bessaroth, after the Sefer Torah had been taken out, we would put down our prayer books, get an individual volume of one of the 5 books of Moses, so that we could follow along as the Hazzan is reading the parashah. Another thing, the first thing we say at the synagogue at the start of morning services are the 2 paragraphs of the Tefillin, starting Kadesh Li Kol Behar. And at the end of the service, we recite Psalm 27, Le David Hashem Ori V'ishi. Rabbi Greenberg, Alav Shalom, copied both of them from another Siddur, had several copies made, and pasted one into the front inside cover of the Desolapul Siddur, and the other into the back inside cover. During the morning prayers on the first 2 weeks before the holiday of Pesach, there are special readings for each day leading up to Pesach called Seder Chodesh Nisan, the order of the month of Nisan, also known as Korbanot. Both synagogues copied this from other prayer books and made booklets of their own to read at a specific point in the morning service during these 2 weeks. When I started working on Zehut Yosef and it came to put this into the prayer book, I am not exaggerating when I say that it took from 4 to 5 months to finish typing in just that section. It takes up 22 pages of small print. And like these examples, there are many, many more. I date my first efforts toward creating a Siddur to March 1994. At that time, I had heard of a company in Israel by the name of Ligatura, that was working on a program to do optical character recognition, or OCR, with Hebrew. I was hoping to scan in one of our old prayer books. The word that I got back was, Ligatura was working on Hebrew OCR, but was still quite away from producing it. When and if it was produced, it would cost a few $1,000s, and I should forget about Hebrew OCR that would include the vowels. The company had tried it without success because the vowels, or as we call them in Hebrew, nekudot, were confusing the scanner. Well, I can read, can I? I found out that the Davka Corporation in Chicago had come up with a Hebrew word processor called Dagesh Lite, L-I-T-E. I ordered it and installed it on my computer. The very first words one says when waking up in the morning is a sentence beginning Modeh Ani. So I need to start typing in the word Modeh. I put in a mem, the first letter, then a vav, then a cholem, the dot on top that gives it the O sound for mo, then a dalet, then a segol that gives it an S sound, de, and the final letter he. I had the word modeh typed out, but it had taken me a little while just to type that one word. And I thought to myself, at this rate, it's going to take 100 years before I can finish this Siddurim. Nevertheless, I kept plugging away for a few months until I got a notice from the Davka Corporation that it had an Ashkenazic Siddur on a floppy disk. And I thought to myself, despite the fact that it's an Ashkenazic Siddur, a good part of it should be very close to what I need. I ordered it, and when it arrived, I was so overjoyed that I skipped dinner that night and worked until 3 in the morning. I'm not sure my kids remember how obsessed I was with what I called my Siddur project. I didn't pay as much attention to them as I should have. I was looking forward to the day, a year forward from that I would retire from Boeing, which was July 1st, 1995. Sometime after I retired, Davka came out with a new Hebrew word processor called Davka Writer. From the promotional materials, it appeared to have more and better features than the Dagesh Lite that I was using. So I bought version 1 of Davka Writer and upgraded to each new and more powerful version. I can't remember which version it was that had the whole Tanakh, the whole Bible in it. But at that point, I could now put all of the Sefer Torah readings in and much more. By 1999, I felt I was at the point where I should make some pre-publication copies, pass them around to individuals at both synagogues, and get some input back. My records show that I made 20 pre-publication copies in 1999 and passed them out to knowledgeable members of Bikur Cholim and Ezra Bessaroth, hoping that they would come back with corrections of errors and suggestions for improvement. At this point, I had not figured out what to do about something called a kametz chatuf, a kametz which looks like a little T, which is normally pronounced A, but at times it's pronounced O, and the sheva na'a, or sheva na, which at times has no sound, it's a nach, and sheva na'a when it's pronounced E. I can't take the time to explain, but I took care of that problem by enlisting the aid of Don Hazzan, Janine's husband, in modifying the Hebrew font that I was using for the Siddur so that it had a big, bold kametz available for a kametz hatuf and a big, bold Shabbat, 2 dots, one on top of the other. And it was an elegant solution. At this point, I said to myself, I need an English translation. I found one published by a Syrian Jew by the name of Sam Catton in Brooklyn. My cousin Joel Ben Alil asked me to contact Mr. Catton, explain our position, and see if he would be willing to sell the English translation of his Siddur. And long story short, he did agree for a specific sum. I was aware that our Turkish Rodesli tradition had many differences when compared to other Sephardic Siddurim, and I had to keep them in mind when we did the English translation so that we would be true to the Hebrew on the other side of the page. Until that time had no name. Until about May 2000, I was calling it the Seattle Sephardic Community Daily and Sabbath Siddur. Joel told me he wanted to fund its publication and would like to name the Siddur in memory of his father, alav shalom, Yosef Chaim ben Oliel. So the Siddur would be called Zehut Yosef, the merit of Joseph. I retired from Ezra Bessaroth on January 1st of the year 2000. In June of that year, they tendered me a beautiful retirement dinner at the Seattle Sheraton. A month later, my wife Lily, of blessed memory, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. We moved to New York in August to have her chemotherapy done at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in Upper Manhattan. But I took with me a laptop computer with all my Siddur files. When I wasn't tending to Lily or driving her back and forth to the hospital, I was working on the Siddur. I flew back to Seattle once or twice to take care of personal matters, and on one of those trips, Joel told me we needed to establish a nonprofit foundation for publication of the Siddur. He allowed me to name the foundation, which I called the Sephardic Traditions Foundation. Fortunately, no one else had used that name before. He hired a law firm to take care of the legal aspects, and we were in business. That was March 2001. I'm not sure when I first made contact with Linda Israeli, who is here tonight. Linda, where are you? Raise your hand. Thank you. At the time, she was working for a company called GAC Allied in the Georgetown district. I had no idea how things worked, and she took me through the steps I needed to publish my book. She told me about the paper, the PDF that contained all the pages of the Siddur. I would need a design for my book cover and spine, as well as a choice of color. I asked Linda who I could get to design a cover. She said to me, I know someone who can do a good job for you. Her name is Amy Shane, who is also with us tonight. Amy, where are you? Amy came up with a beautiful design. See the original Zehut Yosef. Amy later modified that design so that we could add a little rectangular area at the bottom of the cover to allow names to be embossed on them. Linda prepared all the specifications for me. I let Linda know that I wanted to order 3,000 books, and she got me an estimate. Sephardic Traditions Foundation donated the initial quantities of Siddurim for our 2 synagogues in Seattle. Linda mothered that project through the whole process. Lily passed away on December 11th of 2001. The books were going to be printed at the end of January 2002. The shipping schedule would put them in Seattle at the end of February. Dr. Maureen Jackson was doing a study on the differences between the Dissolable Siddur prayer book and Zehut Yosef. I still can't figure out why this subject intrigued her. She's not even Jewish. She contacted me sometime in February and asked if she could interview me for the paper she was writing. We made an appointment to meet at my home on Thursday, February 28th of 2002. She really grilled me, but I think I had a lot of supporting documents for all the statements I made. She titled her paper, The Politics of Prayer, a textual ethnography of Zehut Yosef, the Seattle Sephardic Community Daily and Sabbath Siddur. Her paper is 20 pages long and very well done. If anyone is interested, they can read it on my website. You can write or call, and I'll tell you how to get to it. 9 days after that interview, on Shabbat, March 9th, 2002, Zehut Yosef was introduced at both synagogues. Sephardic Bikur Hulim was gracious enough to offer a kiddush in my honor. In about January of 2004, I received a call from Rockville, Maryland, from an individual by the name of Sammy Emar. He says to me, I have a copy of your Siddur and I'd like to buy some, but I've got a problem. What's your problem, Sammy? He says, you have Pirkei Avot, sayings of the fathers, with a Ladino translation. None of the members of our synagogue, Magen David, know any Ladino at all. They are of Iraqi, Syrian, and Moroccan descent. If you can give me an English translation for Pirkei Avot, I'll buy 600 from you. It didn't take me long to say yes. I found an out-of-copyright English translation of Pirkei Avot that I could use. I increased the quantity to 1,000 in order to bring the unit cost down, and in that way, I would have 400 to sell with an English translation. Here's a depiction of that version of Zehut Yosef, a light blue cover. About 2 months later, in March of 2004, I produced an all-Hebrew Siddur. The Hebrew-English Zehut Yosef was a little heavy, and for those who didn't need English, it made a lot of sense. One Sunday morning, after synagogue services at Ezra Bessaroth, Maury Capelluto comes over to me, pulls up his sleeve, makes a muscle, and says, feel this, pointing to his muscle. I went along with it to see where this was going. He says, I got these muscles from carrying your book. Next time, Zichron Rachel, the prayer book for Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, in March of 2007, just in time for Pesach. Sephardic Traditions Foundation donated 500 to each of the 2 synagogues. Let's see that up there, Zichron Rachel. Because this Mahzor has more than 400 pages, I asked Linda about using a much thinner paper so that it would not turn out to be almost as thick and heavy as Zehut Yosef. Linda warned me about the paper being so thin one could see through to the other side. But that's not what I should have been worried about. The paper was so thin that it is difficult to turn the pages. Nevertheless, I am proud of this Mahzor because I had been encouraged to make one book for each of the 3 holidays. But with this book, I was able to consolidate all 3 holidays, and it has worked out very well. Up to this point, with Zehut Yosef for daily and Sabbath prayers and Zichron Rachel for the 3 festival holidays, I had been able to accommodate both the Turkish and Rhodes traditions because the services are very much the same. But for the other 3 books of the 5 publications, because there are major differences in the liturgy between the Turkish tradition and the Rhodes tradition, the last 3 were produced specifically based on the Rhodes tradition. On Rosh Hashanah of 2011, I published Mahzor Tefillah LeDavid, sponsored by the extended Behar family in memory of Reverend David J. Behar, Alav Shalom. Linda Israeli was and is such a dedicated friend that she found out that it would cost too much for her company to print the Mahzor, so she found me a company in Phoenix, Arizona that would do the job at less cost. Amy Shane was not available to draw the cover design, so Linda suggested Dale Cohn, the son of Lou and Ray Cohn. Dale is a designer. This kind of work is right up his alley. Dale continued with the same design that Amy had come up with, and he was able to provide the printer with the specifications for the cover and the spine. In January of 2012, I produced an update to the original Hebrew-English version of Zehut Yosef. I corrected many errors that were contained in the original. One of those errors that I fixed was kind of comical. I don't think I will ever live it down. You see that part in red? I'm not sure you can read it, but it says EVEJUJRLASTING. It should have been everlasting, but I think I could, to myself, working on the Siddur late at night, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, with my eyes half asleep. I hit the space bar, and then I hit the letter JUJR, and it should have been taken out and become everlasting, but it became Jujurlasting. However, no matter how many times I review a file, it's extremely difficult to catch all errors. Shortly after the release of the new Hebrew English Yehud Yosef in January 2012, I was approached by Stephen Baral wanting to know if he could sponsor the upcoming Yom Kippur Mahzor in memory of his father, Moshe Baral. I told him that I had my heart set on naming the Yom Kippur Mahzor after my father, since it would be the last major project I would be working on. He asked if there were any other project I was working on that he would be able to sponsor. I told him that I had one other project that was close to being finished, a book for the 5 fast days. He said that he would like to sponsor this book and name it in memory of his father and call it Tefillah LeMoshe. Stephen had some kind of a connection to the office of the former Ashkenazic chief rabbi, Israel Meir Lau. Stephen convinced him to come to Seattle for the dedication of the book. He even had Rabbi Lau send to me a michtav beracha, a letter of blessing in Hebrew, which is included in the book. Rabbi Lau graced us with his presence on the Shabbat of June 23, 2012, and the book called Tefillah LeMoshe, Order of the 5 Fast Days. And now I come to the last publication, the Yom Kippur Mahzor, which I named Kol Yaakov, the voice of Yaakov or Jacob. I had started working on it in 2010, 4 years ago, and pre-publication copies were also printed in 2012 and 2013. After Yom Kippur of 2013, last year, I decided that we needed to produce the book for this year's Yom Kippur services. I called a meeting of a few of us from Ezra Bessaroth, Hazzan Nuna, Rabbi Benji Owen, Chacham Aryeh Greenberg, David Elazar Behar, and myself to go over any errors, section by section, to eliminate as many errors as we could find. We had 2 more meetings at which a few more errors were found, and then it was up to me. I spent most of my days and nights from that point on working on the Yom Kippur Mahzor in preparation for having it published this year. Ike Behar had made little notes in all the pre-publication editions and went over each item with me after the holiday. Sometime after the first of this year, we were informed by my stepdaughter, Tehiyah Levine, who is here tonight with her husband, Rabbi Chaim, that their youngest child, Baruch, would be having his bar mitzvah in Israel on July 3rd. So that meant that we would have to have the Mahzor, I would have to have the Mahzor finished in the form of a PDF that I could send to the publisher before we were to leave for Israel. Someone, who shall remain nameless, put me in touch with an Israeli publisher with offices in the U.S. who would print the Siddur at a much lower cost. I kept Linda informed of what I was planning to do, and she gave me her blessing. We were scheduled to leave Seattle on Monday, June 23rd, and would return on July 16th. As luck would have it, my computer crashed on June 6th, and the hard drive was gone. I'm not going to get into the technical aspect of what this meant, but it was a crisis. I did have a company called Carbonite to back up my computer, but through my own fault, I did not know that it backed up only libraries by default. I should have known better than that. And my Davka Writer files were not in the libraries. Long story short, I needed a computer tech who knew what he was doing, and I was directed to Craig Walker. Craig, where are you? Raise your hand. He is Albie and Selma Ammon's son-in-law, married to their daughter Michelle. Craig was able to restore my computer, but was not able to restore all the files. However, the Yom Kippur files were still intact, thank God. I was able to send the PDF to the publisher in Israel on June 22nd, the day before we left Seattle for Israel. In Israel, we were staying with my brother Michael and his dear wife Bonnie, and unbeknownst to me, although the publisher was in Israel, the printer was in Michigan. The publisher transmitted the PDF to the printer. The printer wrote back to the publisher in Israel that there was something wrong with the PDF. We found out that it had something to do with embedding fonts. I had no idea what they were talking about. My brother Michael has a U.S. Vonage line where they are able to make and receive calls to the U.S. I called Craig in Seattle. He found out what to do to embed the fonts and sent me the files with the embedded fonts, which I then transmitted to the printer in Michigan. This was something Linda, without my knowing it, had done for me, utilizing some of their support group, and I never got involved. Next, we needed to put dedication pages in the PDF. Again, I had to call Craig and forwarded to him the information that we needed, and he produced the dedication pages, which I then transmitted to the printer. There were problems with the specifications. I sent Linda an email, and she took care of that problem. I had to have Dale Cohn get involved again. I spent many sleepless nights in Israel, as Elisa will attest. Everyone came through with flying colors, Baruch Hashem. 200 of the Yom Kippur Mahzorim, as was said before, were shipped by air to Cape Town. They were supposed to go by sea, so it wouldn't cost them so much money. They really wanted 300, but they made do with 200. And also 56 to the Kal Shalom on the island of Rhodes, which they got 2 days before Yom Kippur. Couldn't believe it. They also went by there in time to go through customs. And we told you about Victor Hazzan and Sam Amiel. And let's show all the books together, all 5 publications. You got it. I would like to thank the following people from the bottom of my heart. Zehut Yosef and Zichron Rachel were worked on by teams from both synagogues. In particular, from the Bikur Cholim, I would like to mention my uncle Rabbi Solomon Maimon, Dr. Larry Adado specifically, who has a keen eye for anything that looks out of place, Albert S. Maimon, Jack Babani, Sam Mazestrano, Dr. Eli Levy, David Maimon, David Shane, and David Korn. I would like to acknowledge the memory of Rabbi Greenberg, who helped with Zehut Yosef. Also helping with Zehut Yosef, Zichron Rachel, and the other projects at Ezra Bessaroth were Hazzan Yogev Nuna, Haham Aryeh Greenberg, Rabbi Benji Owen, David Elazar Behar, and Isaac Behar. I would like to thank Don Hassan for modifying the Hebrew font I used to accommodate the Kametz Hatuf and the Sheva Na'ah. Additionally, I want to acknowledge Rabbi Daniel Hadar of Miami Beach, who wrote introductions and commentaries for the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur Mahzorim. Ruti Yonker helped with typing some Hebrew text for the Yom Kippur Mahzor. As I mentioned earlier, Craig Walker helped me out immensely for the publication of the Yom Kippur Mahzor in many ways. Linda Soriano Israeli supported me well in all of my projects and acted as a liaison between the last 2 printed copies that I worked with. Amy Shane provided me with the original beautiful design for each book cover, and Dale Cohn modified the same design that went to the publishers for the last 3 books. My brother, Rabbi Michael Azose, our keynote speaker, worked on portions of the English translation that we did not receive when we bought the translation of Assyrian Siddur for Zehut Yosef. My son, Rabbi Yossi Azose, did the same and did the entire translations of Zichron Rachel, the Festivals Mahzor, the Rosh Hashanah Mahzor, and the Yom Kippur Mahzor. Harley and Leila Franco deserve a lot of praise for coming on board the Yom Kippur project a year ahead of time with a large donation to kick off the project. I am extremely grateful to my cousin Joel Ben Leal, who took the bull by the horns, set up the Sephardic Traditions Foundation, had all the legal work done, set up a bank account, and was the first donor sponsor who kicked off the first project, Zehut Yosef. Although he was not involved in any of my projects, Joe Aguado, who could not be here tonight because he is on a trip to Turkey and Rhodes, among other places, worked long and hard to accommodate me to make sure this evening's event came to fruition. If I've missed anyone, I'm truly sorry and beg their forgiveness. I know that we've got the servers, Dahlia particularly, for doing such a wonderful job with the food service. Our professional photographer, Meryl Alcabez, who's been taking pictures all evening. Thanks are due to Michael and Bonnie for coming all the way from Israel for this occasion. And to my stepson, Rabbi Chaim Levine, who cut short a trip to Israel to fly back in time for the dinner. This is a quick trip for them because they flew in this morning and se quiere el Dios, they're flying back tomorrow afternoon. I would be remiss if I didn't thank, I'm sure I've missed somebody, but I'm so sorry if I have, and I beg your forgiveness. But there's one person I haven't thanked, and I want to save it for last. Many of you here tonight are aware of how Elisa and I met and later married. We have been married for a little over 11 and a half years. At times, the road has been a little bumpy, but we've always managed to overcome all obstacles. She truly looks after me and takes good care of me with all my faults. She has been with me during all of my projects except the first. But I think this last project, Kol Yaakov, the Yom Kippur Mahzor, was the hardest on her because I wasn't available to do anything for her. I was under a lot of pressure to get the job finished, and she understood my need to pursue my passion. Elisa, I want you to know that I love you, and I appreciate all you do for me. Thank you all for coming. I shall never forget this wonderful evening.
Hazzan Azose, before you sit down, it's my pleasure to make a presentation to you at this time on behalf of the congregation and really on behalf of all those who have benefited from your tremendous work, as we said before. Again, we can't adequately thank you for the priceless gift you've given us. Hazzan Azose, the first two letters of your last name appropriately spell Oz, the Hebrew word for strength. We wish you continued strength and good health so that we can share many years and many more special occasions together. Para muchos años, con salud buena y alegrías. Amen. On behalf of our Keilah, I present you with this small memento of this evening's celebration. I hope you will keep it and enjoy it and remember it with the love and appreciation with which it was given.
Thank you so much.
Wow, it's delicious.
Show it to us, Hazzan Azose.
Yes, it's actually on the screen too. It's in plexiglass. This is a etched glass monument for Mr. Azose with the, as you can see on the overhead, with the template of the Mahzor Kol Yaakov Yom Kippur Siddur Mahzor presented to Hazzan Emeritus Isaac Azose and the Sephardic Traditions Foundation on the completion, Siyum, of Mahzor Kol Yaakov, and with it the 5-volume set of prayer books encompassing our unique Sephardic liturgy. With love and appreciation, Ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to please stay now for the Hazzan Nuna's rendition of the Birkat HaMazon. Okay, please take your seats and we will say the Birkat HaMazon now.
Hazzan Nuna, I have a special favor to ask of you. I've made the Birkat HaMazon with a transliteration so that everyone can follow along. So I would like you please to read the Birkat HaMazon very slowly so that everyone can follow along with you. Thank you.
Hazzan, no, I'll bring you a microphone here.